ASU की साइकोलॉजी लैब है, उसके अंदर वो साइको प्रोफेसर जो है वो बैठे हैं, उन्होंने अपने स्टूडेंट्स को मिला के कुछ टीचर्स को हायर करके वो वहाँ पे बनाए। तो बहुत ज़बरदस्त उन्होंने सबको वो
Good, inshallah.
عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. We send our condolences to the Imam of our time for the tragedy of Karbala. First, I'd like to request all of you to recite the Surah Fatiha for the marhumeen of the family who is sponsoring the program tonight and sponsoring the tabarruk. You might have a little bit of a confusion on tabarruk, so we're trying to figure it out. But please recite the Surah Fatiha for their marhumeen, the marhumeen whose names are on this wall, and all your marhumeen with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Inshallah, we'll start our program with Quran recitation, followed by poetry, and then inshallah we'll have Maulana Hussain Walji online for Aza, and we'll end the program with the Mia. With that, I'd like to request Brother Ali Ballu to start the program with Quran recitation, the Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Inshallah, we'll continue from yesterday, ayah 19 to ayah 24. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والذين آمنوا بالله ورسله أولئك هم الصديقون والشهداء عند ربهم لهم أجرهم ونورهم والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب الجحيم. اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولحن وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يحيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. سابقوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها كعرض السماء والأرض أعدت أعدت للذين آمنوا بالله ورسله ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها إن ذلك على الله يسير لكي لا تأسوا على ما فاتكم ولا تفرحوا بما آتاكم والله لا يحب كل مختال فخور الذين يبخلون ويأمرون الناس بالبخل ومن يتول فإن الله هو الغني الحميد صدق الله العلي العظيم
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ما شاء الله. You have to figure it out why.
صلو علی محمد و آل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Technical difficulties. ہمارے دیگر نعرے صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بھائی اجازت. شاہوں کا تذکرہ ہے نہ لشکر کی بات ہے. شاہوں کا تذکرہ ہے نہ لشکر کی بات ہے. جو کربلا میں لوٹ گیا اس گھر کی بات ہے. ذکر غم حسین ہمیں کیوں نہ ہو عزیز خوشنودی خدا پیمبر کی بات ہے. حسین بھائی ملاحظہ کیجیے گا شعر
مجلس کے احتجاج ہے ہر ظلم کے خلاف، مجلس کے احتجاج ہے ہر ظلم کے خلاف، پیغام عدل ماتم سرور کی بات ہے۔ ہوگی نہ کربلا کی کبھی ختم داستاں، ہوگی نہ کربلا کی کبھی ختم داستاں، کہنے کو یوں تو صرف 72 کی بات ہے۔ کس کس کو روئے اہل حرم ڈھائے کیا کریں، کس کس کو روئے اہل حرم ہائے کیا کریں، ہے عمر بھر کا داغ بھرے گھر کی بات ہے۔ یہ امتحان صبر بہت سخت ہے حسین، یہ امتحان صبر بہت سخت ہے حسین، محضر میں بیردائیے خواہر کی بات ہے۔ سوزے غم حسین ملا جس کو مل گیا، سوزے غم حسین ملا جس کو مل گیا، انجم یہ اپنے آپ نے مقدر کی بات ہے۔ شاہوں کا درود پڑھیں محمد آل محمد۔ فاتحہ۔ مولانا آپ لوگوں کو کوئی غم دیتے سوال غم حسین کی۔ حضرت کو ہوا ماہ محرم جو سفر میں، حضرت کو ہوا ماہ محرم جو سفر میں، ایک داغ پڑا اور بھی صغرا کے جگر میں، نانی سے کہا مرتی ہوں دوری پدر میں، کاشور کی بھید نہ ہوگی میرے گھر میں، کیا جانتی تھی ایسے بچھڑ جائیں گے بابا
وہ دل بھی کبھی ہوگا کہ پھر آئیں گے بابا. کیوں نانی رجب تھا کہ سدھارے تھے سفر کو, پورے 6 مہینے ہوئے دوری پدر کو. ہر حج کر کے پھرے اہل وطن خیر سے گھر کو, پھر قبلہ و کعبہ گئے کعبے سے کدھر کو. زہرا کا قمر سوئے مدینہ نہیں آیا, اس چاند کی رویت کا مہینہ نہیں آیا. پیدا ہوئے اصغر تو پیام اجل آیا. افسوس کے جھولے میں بہن نے نہ جھلایا. ارے بھیا کو نہ جی بھر کے گلے سے بھی لگایا. بچھڑے تو کبھی خواب میں بھی منہ نہ دکھایا. داخل شاہدی اب بھی نہ گھر میں ہوئے نانی, اصغر 6 مہینے کے سفر میں ہوئے نانی. بابا پہ کٹے خیر سے یارا یہ مہینہ, اس خدشے سے ہر وقت پھٹا جاتا ہے سینہ. میرے بابا سے میرے کوفیوں کے دل میں ہے کینہ, حضرت سے لڑائی کا کہیں ہو نہ قرینہ. کوفے کی طرف سے جو ہوا آتی ہے نانی, سب کل کے رونے کی صدا آتی ہے نانی. سب کل کے رونے کی صدا آتی ہے نانی. حضرت کو ہوا ماہ محرم جو سفر میں.
مولا کو غم نہ دے آپ لوگوں سوائے غم حسین کے. برائے صحت و سلامتی تمام مومنین مومنات اور خصوصاً پاکستان پارا چنار جیسے ملکوں میں جہاں پہ شیعہ مومنین مومنات کے اوپر ظلم کیا جا رہا ہے, ان کی صحت و سلامتی کے لیے آواز بلند نعرہ سلامت.
Jazakallah, Brother Haidar. Inshallah, we'll continue our program with speech. We are honored to have Maulana Hussain Walji from Minnesota. He has not been able to travel yet. We are hoping that he can come and join us here in person, inshallah, soon. But for tonight, he is going to be live from Minnesota. I'd like to request Maulana Hussain Walji to start the speech with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. جب پیو پانی حسین ابن علی کا نام لو, جب پیو پانی حسین ابن نے علی کا نام لو، یاد کر کے پیاس مولا کی کلیجہ تھام لو، الفت شبیر ہے تو غم کرو شبیر کا، حضرت عباس سے در دو وفا کا نام لو، جب پیو پانی حسین ابن علی کا نام لو، پرچم اسلام ہے عباس غازی کا علم، اس کے سائے میں رہو اس کا فریرا تھام لو، جب پیو پانی حسین ابن علی کا نام لو، گرتے گرتے تم سنبھل جاؤ گے ہے دعویٰ میرا، جب کبھی ٹھوکر لگے مولا علی کا نام لو، جب پیو پانی حسین ابن علی کا نام لو، کانوں سے بالی سکینہ کے لبوں کو چیر کر، کانوں سے بالی سکینہ کے لبوں کو چیر کر، گوشوار اس یتیم کے نہ اہل شام لو، جب پیو پانی حسین ابن علی کا نام لو، بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات، اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد، الفاتحة، بسم الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، بسم الله وبالله وصلى الله على محمد وآله وفوز أمري إلى الله، إن الله بصير بالعباد، الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله، لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم محمد، اللهم صل على محمد، روحي وجسمي وروح العالمين لك الفداء يا ابن رسول الله، ثم السلام عليكم يا أهل العزاء الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس ليذيقهم بعض الذي عملوا لعلهم يرجعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. This is an ayah from Surah Rum, ayah number 41 of the Holy Quran. Sometimes when I think of it, this is one of those surahs that we are asked to recite on the 23rd of the holy month of Ramadan. There are messages in all these surahs, and there must be a very good reason why we recite this particular surah. Because if you look at this particular ayah, it says that corruption has appeared throughout the land and the sea by reason of what the hands of people have earned, so he may let them taste part of the consequences of what they have done, that perhaps they will return to righteousness. We are currently facing a crisis, and it is a pandemic. Every home and every community is going through it. Some homes are arguing about masks. Some homes are arguing about vaccines. There's not a home where this discussion hasn't gone through. We've all gone through it. Within a home, even among our children, our brothers and sisters, within that home, there is a discussion about this particular pandemic. There are protests, imagine, in this country where people are protesting to remove the mask. They're praising those governors who have decided to ban the masks. And unfortunately, the same places are now facing a catastrophe. And we are finding that it is not only the adults, it's not only those who are vulnerable, but the children are also facing the same crisis. And does crisis, when we go through this crisis, do they make us better people? Or do we get even worse? Post-war, when a war happens around the world, what happens? The people and those who are involved in those wars, When the army comes back, they go through emotional problems. Some of them recover, others never recover for what they have done. Children are killed. Women are killed. Women become widows. And so many things happens during a war. Ayatollah Muhammad Taqi al-Mudarrasi, may Allah give him a long life, he said that we should fight this pandemic like we had fought in Iraq with the Daesh people. He was just giving an example. And in his example, he says the only way we can fight this war is to have a solid infrastructure. If you didn't have a solid infrastructure, you will fail this war. And we know, we've gone through crisis ourselves. When 9/11 happened, and those of you who are in this part of the world saw the changes that took place. One thing we should realize is that whenever there is a crisis of any kind, changes will happen. And believe me, it will never be the same again. Things will be so different. In 9/11, so many things happened. We saw the tightening of the security at the airports. We saw the creation of TSA. And we saw that the banks had to have solid compliances, something that they had never experienced. And so did many, many businesses. The movement of Imam Hussain alayhi salam was a movement that was to bring reforms. Why? Because there were those who were determined to destroy the efforts that were put together by our Holy Prophet. They made every effort to make sure that in that crisis, they would take the advantage and try and spread the kind of Islam that Yazid was practicing. Imagine that Islam, if we would have had that Islam today. What would have been the moral and the ethics of the entire world? Because Hussein did not just fight for the Shias, he was fighting for all of humanity. And therefore it was important for him to make sure that even if he had to give up his entire family, but to save the Islam that we have today. He gave everything away, everything. Knowingly gave everything away. Because he was there to save Islam. When something like this happens, when crises happen, we are forced into changing our way of life, isn't it? And how quickly we adapt to those changes. When this pandemic began, we were told that this is 1 in 100 years that it comes, while the history testifies that it is otherwise. Actually, every 9 years, in average, there is an endemic And then every 20 years, there is a pandemic. Pandemic may be a worldwide pandemic, or it could be in certain areas or certain places of the world. But we haven't seen anything like this, at least in our lifetime, that happened throughout the world. Now the scientists are saying that if we are not careful to make the necessary changes, we will find that we will face this pandemic every 10 years. Nobody told us that this was going to be an 18-month or 30-month pandemic. But look at where we are today. Suddenly now it looks like we spent an entire year in this form. And I was not able to come there because of the cases of COVID just rising in many parts of this country. And almost in every state, the numbers are going up and up. And unfortunately, the victims of this are also children. So it is very, very important for us to understand that when crises happen like this, suddenly we find that the ideas that were impossible to implement have now been implemented. In Finland, they've decided that during this pandemic, that we need to eradicate homelessness. Something most countries have left it aside. But Finland decided that no, we're going to put every homeless person in a home permanently. And when they looked at the cost of doing that, they found out that it was cheaper to do that than what they were doing. Look at us, look at our communities here and everywhere. How many of you would have ever thought that your company will tell you to work from home? If you would have done this 2 years ago and you would have gone to your boss and said, you know what, I've decided I'm going to work from home, they would have probably not agreed. Yes, some companies were doing it to some extent, but the majority of the companies never did that. To the extent that people are now put into their homes and they work from home, and the companies feel that it is just as efficient as it was those people being on site. So now they are reconsidering and looking at how do we continue this and come out of all the expenses that we have. It would be cheaper if the people would just work from home. But then there were many other companies, because this is a capitalist country. And what happened? You found that there were many, many companies that became even more wealthier than the wealth they had just 2 years ago. Amazon, Pfizer, all these companies now decided to take full advantage of the situation that the people are in. Delivery companies around the world are making so much money today that they never had even predicted. But what this tells you is that during the crisis of any kind, reform happens and people go through it. Now the question is, we also have had to make a lot of changes in our lives. And post-COVID, just like post-war, we will find out what has been the impact. The impact in a household, an impact between relationships, impact between the community members. A lot of things we will start to find out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying in the Holy Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. He's not saying Ya ayyuhan nas, that he's addressing the people, nothing. He's addressing me and you. He's saying, he said, Lima taquluna ma la taf'alun. He's saying, all those who believe, why do you say to others that you yourselves do not do? A very important question. How many times have we seen that we like to have others changed but myself? My brothers and sisters in Islam, this sacrifice of Hussain alayhi salam and his call of Hal min Nasirin Yansuruna on the day of Ashur was not something for the people that were there. This call was for all of humanity. And it is a call until the day of judgment. Look at the world climate, the way it is changing. Look at the fires in the California areas and in Canadian areas. In Algeria, countries we never heard would ever have fires that are destroying the villages. Look at Greece, look at Italy. All of these countries are facing, on top of this pandemic, or you go to Afghanistan and you hear how the Taliban are moving into the different parts of Afghanistan with nothing but destruction for the people. And we pray for those people that may Allah give them safety and security. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and this applies of saying to others, because the oppressors of the world are very good at it, my brothers and sisters, that they would love to tell others, but they don't follow themselves the rules. And Quran also talks about this. This ayah that I recited is a clear indication of this creation of this facade and all these problems that are created by humans. We are told there are different reasons why this pandemic happened. It is because of Wuhan and because of their labs and because of the bats and all kinds of things. But all of this creation is not something that Allah is punishing me and you. This is a creation that we have created as humans that is bringing destruction all over the world. And this is why when it comes to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain and his mission was to establish Amr bil Ma'ruf. His mission was to establish Nahi anil Munkar. His mission was to establish the Salat. We say that in Ziyarat, Ashhadu anna wa akamta as-salat wa atayta az-zakat. Charity and Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar. He gives his mission. And we have to be very careful with these changes, that if we, with all this crisis that are happening, that if we don't keep our family unit united together, that we fight this war together as families, as communities, we will also become the victims of it. Hazrat Shoaib, and you look at how change is very difficult, my brothers and sisters in Islam. And Imam is asking us to change slowly, but to make some positive changes in our lives. He's asking us to reform ourselves. It is one thing for me to come to an adha and be part of it, but then when I go home, I'm a different person altogether. I go to work, I'm a different person. I come home, I'm a different person. It cannot be that. We have to be consistent in what we are doing. So Hazrat Shoaib is shown in the Holy Quran as an example. He speaks to his community, and you will find this in Surah Al-Hud and Surah Al-Araf. And when he wanted to instruct the community, how the community reacted to what he was saying. He said that the first thing this prophet says, Hazrat Shoaib, that I do not intend to call you to do it, that I do not do it myself. Imagine, he first tells them that I don't want you to do it, that what I am not doing. In fact, there was a Maharaja that used to tell his students before they decide to go on a mimbar. They used to tell them that, listen, don't tell people to do the things that you yourself don't do it. And I'm in it too as well. If I am not a charitable person, but I do want others to give charity, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about. That I don't treat my spouse or my children in a way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked me to treat them, then who am I to get on a mimbar and tell others to change? This was a beautiful advice. And then the Prophet said that reform to the extent that it is possible for you. But reform. Don't be the same person every day, every month, every year. Develop something in yourself. If you are not praying salat, then make it a habit of doing it. Fajr salat, if you're missing it, my brothers and sisters, you have no idea what you have missed in a day. And one of the things during this crisis and every crisis, we are told, and I'm glad that as a community, we have made a practice to recite Ziyarat-e Ashura and Ziyarat-e Waritha. And yes, we as a community do it once a week. But really, Sayyid Qazi was a teacher of Sheikh Bahjat. And when this Sayyid Qazi died, he saw Sheikh Bahjat in his dream. And he had just passed away and he was in Barzakh. And he said to Sheikh, he said, listen, I always used to recite Ziyarat-e Ashura or Ziyarat-e Waritha once a day. I wish, he said, I wish I was alive. And I knew that I should have recited more than 3 times a day, because the reward that I have received for reciting these ziyarats is enormous in the barzakh. And Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam has said, Allah salli alayhi, that a person who recites ziyarat-e waritha or ziyarat-e ashura, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes 100,000 sins and gives that person deeds to cover those sins 100,000. Now, all these things are part of our reform that we should be doing to be able to protect ourselves from the environment that we are in. We should stay connected with Abu Abdullah al-Hussain, not just in the month of Muharram, every day, every day. The least I can do is say Assalamu ala al-Hussain wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussain wa ala awlad al-Hussain wa ala ashab al-Hussain. That is the least I can do. And this Shoaib, this Payghambar, is talking to his community, and he is telling them, he says, I want you to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want you to stop cheating. Cheating, he said. Why? Because that was a community that used to cheat in the balances, in the weights. And he knew them. And Imam Ali alayhi salam has said that it suffices you to change your behavior. If you see a behavior in someone else that you do not like it, that it is not present in your own behavior. How beautiful. He goes on to say, when you see good behavior at that time, then make sure you say to yourself, I wish I had that in me, and try to change yourselves. This is how reform happens, my brothers and sisters. Hazrat Shoaib then said, do not cause corruption in the land. Do not go out corrupting people to do the wrong things. Guide them towards doing the right things. And people responded to him. You know what people responded to him with? They said, worship, we don't know what that is. And as far as corruption is concerned, we don't understand. Cheating, it's very difficult to understand. Something was blocking their minds in trying to understand. I mean, it's very simple, right? If somebody tells us, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, don't cheat. It was very simple, but they could not understand. They could not understand. In the Battle of Karbala, we find some of the very people who had written to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain to come and help them in Kufa were now fighting against him. And he, when addressing those people, he made it very clear. He said, listen, the reason your minds and your hearts are blocked, you're not understanding what I'm trying to tell you, is because your stomach is full of that which is haram. This is a powerful message for all of us. We should know what we consume. We cannot just consume for the sake of consuming. we should consume if it is that which is allowed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these people did not understand anything. Reform can happen, and each of us should work on the weaknesses that we have. What are those things that I will change in my life to make my life better, so that I can live on the face of this earth with contentment and calmness? It's very, very important for us to understand that. And you look at Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, when his caravan was moving, he was always preaching to the people. He used to give them many, many examples of Hazrat Yahya, Hazrat Zakaria that we talked about. He used to talk to them about Hazrat Saleh and his camel. Many things. But he was instructing and showing them how to live. One of those members that he saw along the way was Zuhair ibn Qayn. Zuhair ibn Qayn was a follower of Osman. And he was returning back, going back to Medina while the Imam was going towards Kufa. His wife, Zaylam. This companion, Zuhair ibn Qayn, was against Imam Hussain alayhi salam. He respected him. But he had gone against Imam Ali alayhi salam, saying that Imam was responsible in the murder of Osman. This is what he believed in. But when Imam Hussain approached him, and when Imam Hussain alayhi salam talked to him, imagine, he changed. He changed for the better. That we are remembering him even after 1400 years of his contribution. Who was he? He and Abdullah bin Sa'id were two martyrs that were protecting Imam Hussain alayhi salam while Imam was leading the prayers. And arrows were coming from behind. He had 38 arrows in his body. Abdullah bin Sa'id had 52 arrows behind him. But they stood firm to make sure that Abu Abdullah al-Hussain completed his prayers. And Imam prayed for them. Said, Ya Allah, they protected me while the prayers were going on. This Zuhair ibn Qayn, his wife Zaylam, she is one of the narrators of the events of Karbala in the history. As to what she had seen, she had told the people of Medina what had transpired. That was her job then became. That I will narrate what happened in Karbala, what happened to the women and the children in Karbala. Many of the things that we know today in history comes from Zaylam, comes from his wife. She said to one of his people, she gave pieces of dress clothes and said, here, take it. When Zuhair ibn Qayn fell after getting hit with those arrows, because it is said that when Imam Hussain said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, when he said that, at that very moment, both of these martyrs fell. And so, and they had taken his clothes from his body. So his wife said to this person, she says, why don't you go and give these clothes to my husband? cover his body at least. And when this person came back again, Zaylam asks, did you place the clothes on my husband's dead body? He said, no. She said, why did you do that? He said, because I saw the body of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain on the desert. I felt that he deserved it more than my master, Zuhair ibn Qayn. He gave his life for that. There were others whom we need to remember, because after all, there were so many who gave their lives. One of them was John, an African. He had come from Abyssinia, Ethiopia. And he was working. Imam Ali alayhi salam had bought him and then freed him and gave it to Abu Zar Ghaffari. And when Abu Zar Ghaffari died, he went back to Imam Ali alayhi salam. Now Imam was always telling them, you're free, go. But the love of Ahlul Bayt was too much for them. They could not leave them. Therefore, he said no. And then he worked for Imam Hassan alayhi salam. And then finally, when Imam was leaving and Imam Hassan died, he was with Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. And they came together into Karbala. Imam alayhi salam had asked all the slaves to please, you are free, you've always been free, you can go. But none of them left. And this slave, this John, he comes to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain and silently stands before him. Imam Hussain alayhi salam said, oh John, why don't you go? I have freed you. He said, no, Maula. In good times, I was with you. Today, in this difficulty, why should I leave you? Finally, he got the permission to go and fight. John goes out there and starts to fight. Then a moment came when John fell onto the ground. In history, we find two people doing the same thing. One was Ali Akbar when he came down from the horse. All he did was convey the salams to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. When John fell, he did the same thing and he gave salams to Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. And Imam came running towards John. He came running towards John. He took his head and placed it on his lap. He removed the sand from his face and finally he put his cheek on the cheek of John. Imam had not done that to anyone except for Ali Akbar. When he fell down, Imam Hussain had placed his cheek on his cheek, and John was the other martyr that got the privilege from Abu Abdullah al-Hussain. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعف الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم بحق محمد وأنت المحمود، بحق علي وأنت الأعلى، بحق فاطمة وأنت فاطر السماوات والأرض، بحق الحسن وأنت المحسين، بحق الحسين وأنت قديم الإحسان. إلهي توبة قبل الموت وراحة عند الموت ومغفرة بعد الموت والنجاة من النار ودخولا في الجنة وعافیت من کل بلاء الدنیا وعذاب الآخرہ. ماتم حسین.
Ya Hussain,
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 Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain.
کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غم خار غیبت میں میسر ہی نہیں اس کو. کوئی غم خار غیبت میں میسر ہی نہیں اس کو. سو تنہائی میں ہر نوحہ وہ خود کو ہی سناتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. بقیے میں صدائے واہ حسین گونج اٹھتی ہے. بقیے میں صدائے واہ حسین گونج اٹھتی ہے. وہ جب بھی قبر زہرا کے سینے سے لگاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. نہیں تھمتے ہیں اس کی آنکھ سے آنسو کسی صورت. نہیں تھمتے ہیں اس کی آنکھ سے آنسو کسی صورت. اسے بے شیر کا جب مسکرانا یاد آتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. وہ حجت ہے اسی کا کام ہے اس درد کو سہنا. وہ حجت ہے اسی کا کام ہے اس درد کو سہنا. کسی خاکی کے دل میں جان کے غم کب سماتا ہے. کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. کوئی
کوئی غیبت میں بیٹھا خون کے آنسو بہاتا ہے. یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین حسین یا حسین حسین یا حسین یا حسین حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین.
چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، قدم قدم پہ رہے ساتھ عمر بھر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، قدم قدم پہ رہے ساتھ عمر بھر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ماشاءاللہ، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، قدم قدم پہ رہے ساتھ عمر بھر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، یہ جانتے ہو سکینہ کا حال کیا ہوگا، یہ جانتے ہو سکینہ کا حال کیا ہوگا، پلٹ کے آئے نہ دریا سے تم مگر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ کو چھوڑ کر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، قدم قدم پہ رہے ساتھ عمر بھر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، کوئی ہے نوحہ کنا اور کوئی تڑپتا ہے، کوئی ہے نوحہ کنا اور کوئی تڑپتا ہے، بنا ہے درد کی تصویر گھر کا گھر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، قدم قدم پہ رہے ساتھ عمر بھر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، نہ جانے کیا ہوا ساکت ہے بولتی ہی نہیں، نہ جانے کیا ہوا ساکت ہے بولتی ہی نہیں، پلٹ کے دیکھ لو زینب کو ایک نظر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر عباس، خبر نہ ہوگی تمہیں تم تو سو رہے ہوگے، خبر نہ ہوگی تمہیں تم تو سو رہے ہوگے، کب ہوگی زینب دل کی در
چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا
گئے جو تم سوئے مقتل زبان سے کچھ نہ کہا گئے جو تم سوئے مقتل زبان سے کچھ نہ کہا بڑے نہ رہ سکے سب تھے کبھی مگر
چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا
تمہارے بعد جو ہونا تھا وہ ہوا آخر تمہارے بعد جو ہونا تھا وہ ہوا آخر حسین مر گئے زینب ہے ننگے سر
چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا
چلے ہو کس پہ
شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا
چلے ہو کس پہ شہیدی کو چھوڑ کر ابا
یا حسین 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 یا حسین
محمد وآل محمد متوجہ زیارت. اور زیارت کے بعد if you guys would like to go for the ziyarah of Imam Barga, we have made the arrangement, inshallah you all can go over there. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أزور ساداتي وموالي قربة إلى الله تعالى. السلام على رسول الله. السلام على حبيب الله. السلام على نبي الله. السلام على الرسول المسدد. السلام على أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا سيدي مولاي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على أمير المؤمنين